bodhisattvas are in full possession of their superknowledges, and those are not. This bodhisattva, in full possession of his superknowledges, goes, in each of the 10 directions, to world systems numberless as the sands of the Ganges, and there he honors, respects, reveres and worships the tathagatas. Go to numberless Buddha fields, and does not there honor, respect, revere and worship the tathagatas. That bodhisattva, not in full possession of the super-knowledges, does not go to numberless Buddha fields, and does not there honor, respect, revere and worship the tathagatas. This bodhisattva will become a recipient of the super-knowledges, that one will not. This bodhisattva will have a perfectly pure Buddha field, that one will not. This bodhisattva has matured beings, that one has not. The Buddhas and Lords praise this bodhisattva. That one they do not praise. These bodhisattvas will stand near the Buddhas, the Lords. Those will not. This bodhisattva will have a limited congregation, that one an unlimited one. This bodhisattva, after he has known full enlightenment, will have a congregation of bodhisattvas. That one will not. This bodhisattva is in his last rebirth. That one is not. This bodhisattva will have a Mara. That one will not. This is the perfectly pure Dharma-eye of a bodhisattva. Sariputra. What is a bodhisattva's perfectly pure Buddha-eye? The Lord. The bodhisattva, when immediately after the thought of enlightenment he has, with a wisdom conjoined with one single thought moment, entered on the adamantine concentration, reaches the knowledge of all modes. He is endowed with the 10 powers of a tathagata. The 4 grounds of self-confidence. The 4 analytical knowledges, the 18 special buddha-dharmas, the great friendliness, the great compassion, the great sympathetic joy, the great even-mindedness, and the unhindered deliverance of a Buddha. And that eye of the bodhisattva does not meet with anything that is not seen, heard, known or discerned, in all its modes. That is the bodhisattva's perfect Buddha-eye. It is thus that a bodhisattva who wants to cleanse the 5 eyes should make endeavours about the 6 perfections. And why? Because in the 6 perfections all wholesome dharmas are contained, all disciple-dharmas, all pratyekabuddha-dharmas, and all bodhisattva-dharmas. When those who speak the truth have spoken of that which comprehends all wholesome dharmas, they have spoken of the perfection of wisdom. For perfect wisdom is the genetrix of all the perfections, and also of those 5 eyes of a bodhisattva. Having trained themselves in those 5 eyes of a bodhisattva, the bodhisattvas know full enlightenment. The 6 super-knowledges. Instructions about the 6 super-knowledges. The bodhisattva, the great being who courses in this perfection of wisdom, develops the perfection of super-knowledge. He experiences psychic power in its various aspects. He shakes this very earth. Having been one, he becomes manifold. Having been manifold, he becomes one. He can make himself visible or invisible. Ride through a wall, a rampart, or a hill, he glides unhindered, as though through empty space. Cross-legged he floats along, like a bird on the wing. He plunges into the earth and shoots up again, as if in water. He walks on water without sinking into it, as if on solid ground. With his body he emits smoke and flames of fire, like a great mass of fire, and at the same time releases streams of cold water, like a great rain cloud. Even the sun and the moon, powerful and mighty though they be, he touches and strokes with his hands. Even as far as the Brahma world he has power over his body. But he does not fancy himself for that psychic power. For he does not get at that psychic power, which would allow him to mind it, on account of the emptiness, the isolatedness, the inapprehensibility of its own being. He does not, apart from his attention to the state of all knowledge, produce a will for psychic power, nor a will for calling forth psychic power. It is thus that a bodhisattva who courses in perfect wisdom calls forth the cognition of the realization of the super-knowledge of psychic power. With the heavenly ear element, perfectly pure and surpassing that of man, he hears sounds, celestial as well as human. But he does not, by means of that heavenly ear, fancy that he hears sounds. For he does not get at that sound, because its own being is empty, isolated, cannot be apprehended. Outside his attention to the knowledge of all modes, he does not produce a will for the heavenly ear. It is thus that a bodhisattva who courses in perfect wisdom calls forth the cognition of the realization of the super-knowledge of the heavenly ear. With his heart he wisely knows, as it really is, the thought of other beings and persons. He wisely knows, as it really is, a greedy thought as a greedy thought, a greedless thought as a greedless thought. A thought with hate as a thought with hate, a thought without hate as a thought without hate. Deluded thought as deluded thought, undeluded thought as undeluded thought. Thought with craving as thought with craving, thought without craving as thought without craving. Thought with grasping as thought with grasping, thought without grasping as thought without grasping. Composed thought as composed thought, disturbed thought as disturbed thought. Limited thought as limited thought, extensive thought as extensive thought, lofty thought as lofty thought. Concentrated thought as concentrated thought, unconcentrated thought as unconcentrated thought. Detached thought as detached thought, undetached thought as undetached thought. Thought without flows as thought without flows, thought without outflows as thought without outflows. Thought with blemish as thought with blemish, thought without blemish as thought without blemish. Thought with something above it as thought with something above it, thought with nothing above it as thought with nothing above it. But he does not because of that, fancy himself. Because that thought is no thought, on account of its unthinkability. He does not imagine that he knows wisely. And that very thought he does not get at, on account of the emptiness, isolatedness, and inapprehensibility of its own being. He does not, apart from his attention to the knowledge of all modes, produce a will for the cognition of others' thoughts. It is thus that the bodhisattva who courses in perfect wisdom calls forth the cognition of the realization of the super-knowledge of the thoughts and actions of all beings. With the cognition of the recollection of his past lives he remembers 1 birth, 2 births, 3 births, up to 100,000 births. He also remembers 1 thought, etc. Up to 100 thoughts. 1 day up to 100 days. 1 month up to 100 months. 1 year up to 100 years. 1 eon up to 100 eons, many hundreds of eons, many hundreds of thousands of eons, many hundreds of thousands of niyutis of kotis of eons. Up to the limit of the beginning he remembers. There I was, that was my name, that was my family, that was my caste, such was my food, such was the length of my life, such was the extent of my lifespan. Deceased from there I was reborn here. Deceased from here I was reborn there. It is thus that he recollects his various previous lives with all their modes, details and occasions. But he does not fancy himself for that super-knowledge of the recollection of his former lives. Because that cognition is a non-cognition, on account of its unthinkability. He does not imagine that he knows wisely. And that very thought he does not get at, on account of the emptiness, isolatedness and inapprehensibility of its own being. He does not, outside his attention to the knowledge of all modes, produce a will for the knowledge of his past lives. It is thus that the bodhisattva who courses in perfect wisdom calls forth the cognition of the realization of the super-knowledge of the recollection of his former lives. with the heavenly eye, pure and surpassing that of men, he sees beings, as they die and arise again. He wisely knows that those beings, whether beautiful or ugly, low or exalted, undergo a happy or wretched destiny according to karma. Here are the beings who are endowed with good conduct of body, speech and mind, who have not reviled the holy men, who have right views, and who, with this good conduct of body, speech and mind for cause, are reborn in a happy place, in